And you definitely won't see it looking at the box score, but Peyton Barber brought his lunch pail and hard hat to work on Sunday.
I'm laughing because I mean that's basically the only person you've talked about the last 2 weeks, and yeah, he Peyton Barber looked good. The Bucks smashed the Saints, which knocked a bunch of people out of their survival pools. Yeah, just the epitome of a week one matchup, right?
It's crazy, right? Who would have saw that coming? It's your boy Lead. I'm here with Brian. It's the Occupy Fantasy Week 2 podcast. We're going to recap some of Week 1's action, get you up to date and speed with all the news, and talk about Week 2. So the daily plug for Thursday is up on the website. If you don't follow us already, that's at Occupy Fantasy and occupyfantasy.com. So the typical type of Thursday night game, right? After we get a Week 1 that we're excited about, now it's the Bengals and the Ravens.
Yeah, two teams who weren't projected to be that great this year, judging by Vegas win totals, but both off to a good start, both 1-0, and now they get a divisional matchup. But yeah, pretty low game total, 44, I think, and should be, like you said, one of those typical Thursday night games. But that doesn't mean we can't play fantasy, and that's why the plug's up. We wrote about the best players to play, talked about some of the line movement in the betting markets, and really, don't go crazy on this slate. But like we said last Thursday, this last Monday, going to be a bunch of casual players playing DFS. So yeah, definitely go check it out.
Yep, the single game slate. So let's rewind a week and go back to the first game of the season, Eagles and the Falcons. Any real surprises? For me, what obviously stuck out was just Darren Sproles' involvement as far as how many snaps he was getting.
I know the first couple of series, I'm like, man, fuck, is this really how 2018 is going to go? Like Sproles coming out of nowhere and he's going to get a significant amount of snaps. But then the second half played a lot more how I expected with Jay Ajayi. And they said they wanted to ease Ajayi in after coming off this foot injury. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. I'm thinking home opener. Sproles missed all of last year, potentially his final year. They want to get him some work early in front of the home crowd. And, even Peterson said after the game that the second half is likely how they'll use Ajayi moving forward. So I'm not that concerned. I think this may be the most snaps Darren Sproles plays in the game all year. Mm-hmm. We'll see. What do you think? Do you think?
No, I'm 150% with you. It is Week 1, right? So these teams. Atlanta's been preparing all summer for this game, and the Philly coaching staff, Doug Peterson, they're bright, right? They're saying they probably thought let's throw them off guard. They're not going to expect seeing Darren Sproles this active early in the game, but then, like you said, second half settled in. We saw a lot of Ajayi. The Ajayi fantasy owners out there, obviously, had a big sigh of relief when he got into the end zone twice. And I think second half is definitely going to be more indicative of what we'll see from the Philly backfield.
Yeah, and the positive thing, seeing Ajayi get those red zone looks, even got the goal line carry, something he didn't get last year at all with LeGarrette Blount there. So if you have him, I know people will say, he only played a handful of snaps, 12, 15 carries, got the 2 touchdowns, but he's in for a big role moving forward. This offense should be good, especially once Wentz returns. And I think moving forward, it's going to be at least a running back 2 in season long, and definitely in play almost every week in DFS.
Totally agree. Now, on the other side of the ball, we've all said our words on Sarkisian and the Atlanta offense down in the red zone. So we'll save you those spiels here. But Julio Jones delivered a big game. But the running game, now, give it that it was a very tough matchup. They didn't really get going, and now Freeman, he did get banged up, but it looks like he's good to go. What's your outlook on anything change about your perception of this running game going forward?
Maybe it's a more even split than we originally thought. They were alternating series early before Freeman left the game. He didn't practice Wednesday. We're recording this Wednesday night. We'll see if he can recover in time to play on Sunday. But if not, Coleman's going to be in line for a good spot as a 6-point home favorite in Carolina. I don't know. Basically everything we thought would happen, minus the touchdown regression, is what happened. The thing that stood out to me was Julio Jones' target share. It's 75% of their air yards, which is a number you never ever see in real life. 75%. He's going to continue to be dominant.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, such a fall off between their second best passing target, whether you think it's Sanu or Austin Hooper. Julio Jones is obviously the focal point. And hey, look, I know the touchdowns haven't been there, but I just don't see it anywhere as bad as last year, regardless of how bad of a play caller Sarkisian is. So,
Yo, you know who led the NFL in week 1 in end zone targets?
Julio Jones.
Julio Jones with 3, converted 0.
There you go.
Surprise.
Mm-hmm. So hopefully, yeah, Matt Ryan, his accuracy should be a little better as well as they return to the dome. And I don't see any reason to panic if you're either a Falcons fan or invested in the Falcons offense and fantasy. I mean, sure, we knew about Sarkisian going into this year, so it's just not news. Moving forward, I think everyone was on the Baltimore Ravens defense given the matchup. They delivered against the Bills. Any real surprises there? Is this, the Ravens' vertical passing game was there. Is that just because of the Bills or between John Brown, Willie Snead, and Crabtree, do you see like legitimate, week-to-week fantasy value there?
I mean, I don't know, week to week. It was kind of funny, right? They scored, 47 points, and Willie Snead led both receivers and rushers in the game with 49 yards. It's kind of those weird games where everything was spread out. But, I think you and I both like all three of these guys individually. John Brown is healthy. He actually led the team in red zone targets, which if we had thought before the game started, we'd definitely say that's Crabtree, right? But Brown got 2 or 3 red zone targets. As long as he stays healthy, I like him a lot. Crabtree is going to be playable week to week, but we'll need another game to really analyze this because the snap counts and the targets and everything was so screwy because of the quick blowout. So
right.
What do you think?
Completely, yeah. And I mean, we'll see him in action tomorrow night. But yeah, Joe Flacco played probably 2/3 of the game because it was over by the fourth quarter. But for what it's worth, it's something we've talked about all kind of off season. So these are 3 really good weapons that they got, and you could argue this might be the best receiving core Joe Flacco's ever had. And there was a point in time where he was a very serviceable fantasy option. I think the last year/2 years have, it always happens. Like people at their best are overrated, and then at the worst they become underrated. And I think we've reached the point where, Joe Flacco is kind of underrated, and he can get the deep ball. He still has it. John Brown is that deep ball threat. Crabtree is a big body, big target, for short yardage situations. And Willie Snead, he can play all over the field. So, I stacked John Brown and Flacco, week 1 in high risk contests. It worked out well. Not tomorrow given the short week, but it's, I'll find myself looking at these guys in high risk contests, especially because once again, I think they're going to continue to be under respected, right?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing, and everyone says Joe Flacco had a fire lit under him with the drafting of Lamar Jackson. Totally get that, and that's probably the case too. But something that goes overlooked is he was actually healthy coming into training camp for the first time in a couple of years, and especially for older guys coming off injuries. When you get a full healthy offseason, that can really do a lot. And he could, like you said, week 1 he looked great. It's still early, but probably could be in line for one of his best years. Now it's a low bar, but it should be better than the last couple of years.
Exactly, and that's the point. It's the over it's beating that expectation by a good margin. I mean, we heard all summer Harbaugh and the Ravens just raving about John Brown and how great he's been all camp and in preseason, and just kind of like Harbaugh said himself, he's better than the guy we thought we were getting. So I imagine if there's one guy I like who I'm taking their upside on, it's going to be John Brown, right? Like I could see a legitimate 1,000-yard, 8 touchdown season. But we'll see. Just once again, we're looking at value here. We're not writing home about it, but we probably talked too much about him. Anything on the Bills? I mean, kind of what we expected, not really able to run the ball. O-line stinks, right? Against a good matchup, McCoy's going to have trouble. We did see Kelvin Benjamin had a ridiculous amount of air yards.
Dude, number 3 in the entire league. He had 197 air yards or something, and caught 1 pass for 10 yards. So I know people are going to look at the box score and look at how Nathan Peterman did, but they're going to be trailing in a lot of games, boys and girls. So that as long as Kelvin continues his dominant target share and air yard share, he's going to have some big fantasy games. Even though I know I don't like him as a player, Alita, I'm pretty sure you're in the same boat.
Can't stand it, right?
right. But fantasy is mostly about opportunity. He's going to get a ton of opportunity this year. Hopefully, with Allen under center starting this week, he'll get some more catchable balls. And I don't know if that's the case, but you know.
And here's a guy that might be sitting on your waiver wire, right? Week one, after kind of that dud performance. And the reality is he's still their number one receiver. They're going to have very favorable game scripts. And there isn't really a close number two right now as far as kind of target share. So, yeah, you know, if you see him on your waiver wire and your fifth, sixth wide receiver is – and we know how these get, right? Like, yeah, I'd rather have him than Josh Dotson. And I'm saying that as a Skins fan. So, so moving on, we had a tie, right? And Le'Veon Bell had a funny tweet after the game, said, I've just never seen a tie. But what an ugly game. Turnovers left and right. The weather wasn't as bad as I think we initially anticipated, but the way the game played, you'd think there was a hurricane going on.
Yeah, it still definitely affected the deep passing game, as you'll see. I mean, Jarvis Landry, talking about air yards, had a ton. And the big thing to take away from that side of the ball is he was used like Antonio Brown. His average depth of target, the types of routes he was running, way different than when he was in Miami. So if you have an owner in your season-long league that's, you know, maybe disappointed with Landry because his final stats weren't that great, especially considering how much opportunity he got. But he could be in for a monster year, and especially going to New Orleans this week, tons of opportunity. So I like that. What about James Conner? We were high on the model, loved him last week, and he's clearly highly owned for a reason. Moving forward, what do you think?
Well, I saw someone tweet, I can't remember who it was, but if you didn't roster James Conner in DFS at his price this past weekend, you should play like daily fantasy tennis or something because you're missing the point. But yeah, obviously number one at his price point, which is surely going to be adjusted. Everyone had him on the roster, right? So his big game didn't necessarily separate you from a bunch of people, but the volume is going to be there. Pittsburgh's number one running back is utilized in a way we just don't see other teams do. And, that offensive line is top 5 in the league. He's going to have opportunities to get, 25, 30 touches pretty regularly, which you can't say for many guys.
Yep, he's going to continue to get in. And maybe it hurts Le'Veon's case in the long run, showing how D'Angelo and now James Conner has performed with him out of the game. But they're going to continue to use one back and one back only. And to your point about it, just in DFS really quickly, everyone had him. And some players would be like, oh, I'm not going to play, head-to-heads or 50-50s. Everyone's going to have James Conner. He was only 50% owned. 50% of the people didn't realize it or decided not to play him. So that always goes back to that point of us saying, hey, make the opponent prove they know what they're doing. Play the best plays in these low-risk contests and make these opponents know that, hey, I know who the best players are, and I'm going to play them.
Yeah, especially early in the season when we have a lot of new players playing. So, yeah, I mean, keep rolling him out. He's obviously going to be the number one guy, and until we hear any news on Le'Veon, there's no reason to kind of, temper your expectations. So the Titans versus the Dolphins, that game lasted about 9 hours, right? What a yucky game through and through. And the biggest concern was just the injuries on Tennessee's side of things, right? They lost they have Mariota with a funny bone injury, and he came back in, threw a pick, said he couldn't feel his arm. Delaney Walker now confirmed out for the season, and Taylor Lewin, who is dealing with the concussion. It's a pretty banged up Tennessee team. Does this affect you and I have been high on Mariota, right? Does this kind of change how you feel about him rest of the season?
Yeah, I was starting to get that feeling towards the end of preseason. I was really high on a lot of the Titans, and week one didn't look great. He should play this week. We'll see. But the new offensive coordinator Matt LaFleur didn't impress me either. He was running the ball a ton early on first down. Thought he'd be more innovative, throwing more past the running backs early. And getting out of these first and second and long situations, but he didn't. All these injuries are piling up. For some reason, Taywan Taylor, who was tearing it up in the preseason, only played 9 snaps. I'm not really sure what they're doing from a coaching perspective, and Mariota hasn't really solidified himself by any means. So it's really hard to get excited about this Titans team.
I agree. I mean, the only place of optimism, and I might be biased because I own Corey Davis. I did like how they used him in the slot, and he seemed to be the primary number one with 13 targets. So the delivery, he had 60 yards maybe. So the stats weren't there, but I think if Mariota gets healthy, I think he has some big games on the horizon. Now, the Titans were trailing for a lot of the second half, but are you surprised at all? Derrick Henry was only on the field for 20 snaps.
Yeah, that was weird too. I mean, they kind of got out of their game plan early because he got the first 8 carries or touches for them, and then there's basically the Deion Lewis show after that, and it was still a 7-point game. So right. I'm not really sure what's going on there. It's hard to play him if you have him in season long, unless they have a super favorable game script where they're home favorites. But right now, it looks like Deion Lewis, just judging on one game, was a value pick in season long. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, he's going to continue to catch passes. We know that, and at worst, they'll split 50-50, maybe a little more in Derrick Henry's favor if they're leading a game, but got to be concerning for Derrick Henry owners.
Yeah, and like you said, if you did get Deion Lewis, you should be kind of feeling pretty good about it. You don't ever root for injuries. We don't. I mean, but hey, Delaney Walker, someone's going to get an extra kind of spike in their targets. I think the Titans aren't going to be. I mean, the defense didn't really, make me feel good about them. It's going to be a team that's going to find themselves thrown, in second halves and playing from behind. So, Deion Lewis gets a bump that kind of hurts Henry, but these things can change. Next week, all of a sudden, Henry gets 20 carries for 120 yards and 2 touchdowns. So it might, it's a game script thing. Titans right now aren't really a team trending up, but hey, you'll be able to get him in low ownership spots, I think.
Yeah, and also he had a 70-yard touchdown run in the third quarter wiped off the board to do a holding penalty. So if you're just watching box scores or watching Red Zone, they didn't show it. He could have had a big day, and it didn't happen, and the holding kind of came off the ball, so it didn't really impact the play. So I wouldn't be completely discouraged, but something to keep an eye on. Also, real quick, you mentioned their defense. What about Kenny Stills on the other side, though?
Yeah, actually, sorry, I forgot to speak about him. Kenny Stills, man. I think both you and I were always kind of, and I know a few years ago you were like, hey, watch, Kenny Stills is going to catch double-digit touchdowns, right? This is right now a receiver that I think has a chance with Ryan Tannehill back to finish as a top 12 receiver in season long. I'm not saying he will. I'm just saying the upside is certainly there.
Well, all he has to do is hold serve now. He's number 8 overall in the league in fantasy receiving. So just keep doing what he's doing. He's going to continue to get targets. I'm not convinced Devontae Parker gets his role back when he returns from his finger injury. I can't. I mean, I'm biased. I love Stills, and I think his week 1 showing just kind of cemented my feelings for him.
Yeah, and having Ryan Tannehill for as much shit as he gets it is a big boost, man. It's a lot better than Jay Cutler or Matt Moore or whoever else they had throwing him the ball last year. Yeah. So Niners and Vikings, obviously we are all keeping our eye out on the 49ers backfield usage with Jerick McKinnon done for the season, and turned out to be a pretty even split.
Yeah. Kind of 50-50. I know Alf got the goal line looks. Breida had some in the
and he did fumble. He did
fumble. Yeah, that was bad. We had the 49ers in our betting plug, and that was a back-breaking fumble in the red zone. But I don't know. I think I like Breida moving forward. I think Breida could have a big game this week against Detroit. But we'll see. It's going to continue to be roughly a 50-50 split, and if the team gets down, Breida will get more work, I think. But kind of in this Derrick Henry, Deion Lewis type situation. Yeah,
no, that's a good way to look at it. And it really comes down to what are the Niners going to win? If the Niners are winning, then Alfred Morris is probably going to see more work. If the Niners are in, kind of more passing situations, then it'll probably be closer to an even split. And You know, it's not a backfield I'm really excited about in DFS, but in season long, both guys are definitely worth rostering and play by matchup. But I'm not really excited about either of them.
Yeah, it's definitely matchup based, and in DFS, it's rare you'll play one or the other unless they get underpriced for some reason. But what about Goodwin? I know he didn't practice today, got a knee to the thigh, which can be super painful. Hopefully, he's back. Another good matchup here with Detroit. We saw Robbie Anderson on Monday night burn their secondary, and Nunwa get open for a touchdown. So, I mean, there's definitely a good matchup for their passing game.
Right.
So what do you think? I mean, Dante Pettis came in and caught a touchdown. What are your thoughts, Pierre Garçon? What do you think about the whole passing situation there?
So it's tough, right? Because anytime you have a speedster get a hamstring or quad, it's just, that extra step is what they rely on. And in Goodwin's case, you're talking like Olympic level speed. So I'm sure if he's on the field, he's good for it, but I don't see why they'd kind of rush him back here. Naturally, we're going to see, and the Vikings are a tough week one opponent, right? So things get easier against the Detroit team that made Sam Darnold look like Aaron Rodgers outside of the first play. So, I saw Pierre Garçon was actually dropped in my seasonal league by someone who's looking to pick up another receiver. But for me, that's a guy who is kind of going undervalued. And we've seen him in Shanahan's offense before. He is a great possession guy. I think he'll still be a high floor sort of play.
He had a tough matchup this week too against Xavier Rhodes. So
right. Mm-hmm. Another very notable thing to kind of point out. But for what it's worth, I think if there's anyone right now you're rostering next week, it's going to be Garçon from this team.
I can see that. Yeah, I mean. Yeah, if Goodwin is out, Garçon's in a pretty good spot. Mm-hmm. I think he's cheap in DFS, so I like that call.
Yeah, and I mean, last week he had 6 targets on I think like 53 snaps. I expect a little more. I expect him to get a higher kind of percentage of targets his way, and worth a shot, right? Worth looking at. So. The Patriots kind of took care of business. Not too many surprises in that game against Houston, but Chris Hogan was pretty invisible. If you're a Chris Hogan owner, are you concerned?
I'm not. Oh, I guess I kind of am just because of his poor performance, but he actually had 151 air yards. He got a ton of looks downfield. So if you were a fantasy owner and you just looked at the box score, if you played DFS, he was highly owned, and you saw his 1.1 FanDuel points, you're super bummed. I know, but they still only have 3 receivers, and they signed a couple guys this week, Corey Coleman included. Rex Burkhead's banged up. They're going to have to continue to pass. I'm not sure you want to play him this week going against AJ Bowie and Jalen Ramsey.
Yeah,
but against these softer matchup, he's going to continue to get a ton of looks, and he's going to have some big games.
There's one thing I kind of took away from it is and they won, but boy do they miss Julian Edelman, and he's obviously suspended for 3 more weeks, and whoever's kind of holding on to him in your league, which that's me in my league, I think when he comes back, Tom Brady is he's going to do what he always does, but maybe even a little more, without Brandon Cooks in the picture. And, after Gronk, he's the guy.
Probably so. Although I do like Dorsett too. Remember he was a 1st-round pick, and now he's kind of fitted in here with New England. He caught all 7 of his targets, 60-some yards, got a touchdown.
No, he had a great game. No, absolutely.
Yeah, so I like him moving forward, and he's going to continue to be cheap. So I think he's an option. And I don't know, but yeah, all this is kind of moot once I think Edelman comes back.
And Alfred Blue did get a touchdown in the red zone, but Lamar Miller was clearly still the number 1 guy. And with Foreman out, I expect that to continue. High floor sort of play, right? The volume's there, and even if the game script is unfavorable, he's still going to be in the game. He's still going to be. He didn't really do much receiving, but he's still relevant in that sense.
Yeah, he got 77% of the snaps. That touchdown by Blue is bullshit. It was just kind of a sub in, sub out type of thing. But yeah, I think the concerning thing here is how terrible Watson looked. Like we knew he would regress, and I wasn't that high on him going into last year. And but still, you didn't expect him to look this poorly. He didn't play a ton in the preseason, still coming off that injury. So maybe there's not a lot to go but up. But you got to be concerned for the entire team, seeing how bad he looked. His decisions in the pocket or accuracy, it was just miserable performance.
Right, and he didn't play well. Right, simple as that. But on the other end, yeah, Belichick had all summer to kind of get ready for this game and make sure DeAndre Hopkins wouldn't be relevant. I don't think other teams are as good or as effective at game planning and preparing. So yeah, DeAndre Hopkins owners, I wouldn't be too concerned. You know, he'll probably come around and have like a 100-yard game this week. But, you know, yeah, if you put all them chips on Deshaun Watson, I mean, we said it earlier, you know, manage your expectations, because what he did in a short time last year was lightning in a bottle.
Yeah, and like you said, Hopkins, don't be concerned. They basically double teamed him most of the game. You look at a lot of, especially in the red zone, look at some of these plays. He literally had 2 people on him. He still caught 8 for 78. So, you know, get the next couple teams where he's single covered, especially against this Titans defense up this coming week. Who lets Kenny Stills burn them. Could be in line for a big game.
I like it. WTF. Ryan Fitz, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the biggest surprise of the weekend.
Bro, he has won multiple people now $1 million in DFS. This week he won 2 different people $1 million. That 5-touchdown game he had with Houston a couple years ago, he won people $1 million. I mean, he's clearly the most profitable man in DFS
ever, and the most profitable backup quarterback, because at this rate he'll get a big contract next summer. So wow, you know, number one, Saints defense, we talked about this, you know, kind of due for a regression here. I did not see this coming, though. I mean, this was bad. They looked ugly. They were getting beat left and right by everyone and their mom.
It was so bad. I mean, a lot of people had Saints as a survivor pick, and you're like, all right, well, they'll come back. They'll stop them eventually, but it just never happened. It was just the most outlier game for Fitzpatrick possible. He was hitting every deep pass. His expected completion percentage was way lower than what it should have been. He was firing. I mean, he balled out. Give him credit. Deshaun Jackson, Mike Evans got deep. I'm looking up the stats right now on some of these air yards, but real quick, I'm gonna jump to you. Do you think can the Saints defense continue to play this poorly? If so, it has to be great for Breeze and Michael Thomas.
I do think they can. Maybe not this bad, but I think what we saw last year from the Saints, I don't expect to see that this year. Drew Brees was extremely efficient, didn't need to throw the ball. They had second half leads. You know, I think this year he's in line to have 600 plus pass attempts. And we talked about this a few podcasts ago. It's why I was so high on him in seasonal leagues. He was going ridiculously undervalued. You know what I mean? Like, I'm talking about like ninth quarterback at time in some drafts. And, you know, the Saints defense is going to force Drew Brees to throw the ball. And it's really that simple. I don't think they're going to be the worst defense in the league like they were a few years ago, but they're not. I don't see them being a top 10 defense. Maybe I'm wrong, but for what it's worth, if you're a Drew Brees, Michael Thomas kind of owner, even if you got Ted Ginn, who we talked about as a great DFS option last week, yeah, you got to like it.
And Michael Thomas playing more in the slot now too, which we've kind of seen with a lot of these other guys. I think he played 40% in the slot this week, so that's always helping these high profile receivers getting in the slot. It didn't really matter against Tampa Bay, but getting away from some of these number one corners, so that's encouraging. Okay, I finally pulled up the numbers here for Tampa Bay. Just on deep passes, that's throws that travel at least 20 yards in the air. Deshaun Jackson had 129 receiving yards on those throws. He only ran 13 routes, by the way. And Mike Evans had 50 receiving yards, so that's 179 receiving yards on throws down, 20 yards downfield. Just insane numbers and insane efficiency from the entire crew.
Yeah, ridiculous. And I think Deshaun might miss this week with a concussion, but something we had talked about, let's say in the event that he was healthy, he'd probably be a lot higher owned than he should be, because everyone's going to see that box score, but he ran 13 routes. So that usage is something you'd probably want to avoid 99% of the time.
Yeah, with him only running that many routes, what that naturally means is our boy Chris Godwin was running as the number 2 receiver, caught a touchdown.
The God.
Yeah, the God. If Jackson misses this week, he should be in for a pretty big role. he's going to be cheap. When he's gotten the chance to be the number 2, he's performed. He's hit his value every single time in DFS. So this week could be another case of that.
For sure. Now, TJ Yeldon stepped in for Leonard Fournette. It's always tricky with these lower body muscle injuries, but as of right now, it's hard to say what's going to happen on Sunday. But if Fournette is out, is TJ Yeldon hands down, the guy, or with Corey, will Corey Grant be maybe featured more as a passing receiver or as a passing back in the event there's no Fournette?
I think Yeldon's the guy. As much as everyone wants Corey Grant to get more touches, we saw it in the AFC Championship game. He was incredible that first half and kind of went away in the second half. They're all about TJ Yeldon. They're all Corey Grant's their special teamer. Very rare change of pace back. Corey Grant only saw 6 snaps. Yeldon 39 last week. Corey Grant got 1 touch. I think that's going to continue to happen. Fournette didn't practice today on Wednesday. It's going to come down to the wire Sunday more than likely, unless they rule him out early on Friday. If that's the case, Yeldon's going to be the guy. 3 down work. Grant's going to just mix in here and there. But Yeldon, if you're looking for a season-long pickup, he's worth a shot this week in case Fournette doesn't play. And in DFS, he'll be a major value on Sunday if Fournette misses. Speaking
of running backs, what about that Washington backfield? Both Adrian Peterson and Chris Thompson absolutely went off. Now, we all know Chris Thompson is a dynamic dual threat playmaker. His only concern is really A, the injury he was coming off, and B, the usage. How much volume will he get? But he looked quicker than I've ever seen him before, like he hadn't missed a beat. But AP is where I think a lot of people were surprised, right?
Yeah, I mean, bro, they both look so good. Like Chris Thompson, we thought for sure, especially there's some reports coming out in August that he might not be 100% until November. If that's the case, goddamn, look out, because he played 40% of the snaps. I saw something. Kevin Cole, I think he works for Roto Grinders, big data guy. Chris Thompson was the second most valuable non-quarterback this week, based on his receiving and his third down skills, right after Tyreek Hill, who we'll get to here in a second. But
that's the only comparison. I was like, Tyreek Hill had to be number 1, because it's like anytime Chris Thompson touched the football, it was not only a good play, it was a great play.
Yeah, no, it
was like a drive-altering play. So with AP, I mean, my takeaway here, and not to be the Skins insider, but look, the Washington Redskins offensive line is really good. They have, you could argue they have 2 Pro Bowl / All-Pro caliber players and 1 tackle that's in Moses, who's just a step below that, right? And you can't really look around the league and find many teams with like 2 extremely top tier linemen and 1 really good one. So they were banged up last year. Moses was hurt. Trent Williams was hurt. Brandon Scherf was hurt. This year they're healthy. The only concern for me had been, Jay Gruden's play calling, right? Is he going to set up predictable runs? Last year they were very predictable on first down. It's still too early to kind of tell if Gruden picked up anything on last year's play calling, but in situations where the game script is favorable and you think the Redskins are going to win, AP is going to get the work.
And this looks like another one of those weeks where they're 4 or 5 point favorites at home versus Indy. Peterson, when people will look at 26 carries, he must have played a ton. He only played like 50% of the snaps, so it's really going to be game script dependent. I know he had the 70 yards receiving, but that all came on one play on a kind of busted coverage late in the game.
That.
Right, that's not going to happen every week. So super game script dependent, but if you drafted him, took a flyer in your later drafts, you got to be encouraged about what he did in the first game.
Absolutely. And once again, that matchup is very juicy next week. Both guys are very much in the cards, and I do expect Thompson to get a little more usage going forward, simply because I don't think the Skins are going to be in positions where they're going to be, holding off 21-point leads in the second half. But for what it's worth, both guys have some promise right now. On the other end, David Johnson, forget about the stat line for a second, because, we know what the game script was, and, he still got in the end zone. So fantasy owners weren't that devastated, but as far as how they used him in the passing game, we all know DJ is one of the best receiving backs in the league. And I think with Bruce Arians, something that he did really well was lining him up wide and making sure the routes he was running weren't just, behind the line of scrimmage.
Right.
McCoy is from the John Fox coaching tree. Any concerns, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but we were looking at them earlier just as far as the routes he was running, and let's say it's nothing compared to what he was before.
Yeah, if you take a look, you can find it on Twitter. It's floating around there. It was one of those next-gen passing route charts they have for receivers and running backs. It shows basically exactly where they were running on the field for all of their routes. And in week 1, DJ was right around the line of scrimmage, flats, curls, screens. You look at 2016 when he was under Arians, he's running down the field and legitimate receiver-type routes. Mm-hmm. We'll see if this changes. I don't know. It's going to be tough to tell. I still wouldn't be worried. The snap counts were a little skewed, kind of like in that Buffalo game because they were down so much in the fourth quarter. So he's still going to get a ton of work. He's still a top 4 back, I think.
Right.
I don't know if he has the capability and the dynamic offense to make him the number 1 overall back like we maybe thought.
Right. And that's all it is, right? He's still going to be RB1. He's still going to deliver a great season. I think it's just before the season, like literally 4 weeks ago, it was almost like Gurley, Le'Veon Bell, DJ, and then maybe, not for me, but some people had Zeke kind of in that tier. But now it's like Todd Gurley is head and shoulders above the top tier of backs. Like if we had to redraft right now, Todd Gurley's going pick 1, round 1, 99.99% of the time.
Bro, I might take Kamara too.
Oh, yeah. Actually, sorry. I forgot to include him there. Wow. Yeah. And once again, without Ingram in the picture, but he's shown that he can do it all.
Dude, he ran more routes than like AJ Green, Mike Evans. Like he ran routes as a receiver. He was lined up out wide, I think 18 times, ran 18 routes out wide. You're basically getting a running back and a receiver in one player. He's basically, I saw it today described as a PPR cheat code. He's basically 2 players. And he's going to continue to score touchdowns apparently at the craziest rate of all time.
Oh, yeah, and hands down, I would go Gurley and then Kamara. Like, if there was a draft today, that's kind of where I'd be. So as far as that Sunday night game, we were both excited, thrilling all throughout. A-Rod coming back. We saw early on kind of what the Bears could do. What's your biggest takeaway from that, outside fantasy-wise, outside of A-Rod being the GOAT?
Bro, that game took the soul out of me. Oh my God! As it's been very well documented, I'm on the Bears 100 to 1 to win the Super Bowl. An early season win in Green Bay would have been massive for that future. Yet they went the Jacksonville Jaguars in the AFC Championship route. Innovative to start, get a huge lead, and then go into a shell in the second half. Mm-hmm. Very disappointing and disastrous outcome. However, if they learn from their mistakes, you have to be encouraged by their offense. We talked about it in our preseason podcast, how this is going to be a completely different offense, motions and jet sweeps and options, you name it. And they showed it early. Jordan Howard looked good, ran more routes. Allen Robinson looked good. I think it's going to be great for fantasy production. Let's just see them do this over the course of an entire game.
Yeah, no, couldn't agree more. For me, the biggest takeaway was the usage on Jordan Howard. I think that what we're seeing here is that Howard and Cohen both will be on the field a lot. And Howard, who in the past may have kind of gotten a bad rep for his lack of receiving ability, showed that should kind of be put to rest now.
Yeah, he was catching balls out of the backfield. Looked fluid. It didn't look awkward at all. So he's going to catch more passes than we originally thought, I think. Mm-hmm. I want to see Tariq Cohen get the ball more. It was literally the exact same as that Jacksonville AFC Championship game where they used Corey Grant early and all these different types of plays. They did the same thing with Cohen. He didn't touch the ball much in the second half.
No,
so
he didn't. Yeah,
super disappointing. And I hope Matt Nagy and Mark Hefflick learn from their mistakes.
I think they'll adapt. The Lions, on the other hand, are gonna. Who saw that coming after? In fact, you know what? What I did tell a couple of buddies as I was watching after that first interception, pick 6, first play of the game for Darnold. I've seen this so many times. I don't have the data I mean, I can tell you two situations at the top of my head. Ted Ginn returned the first opening kickoff for the Ohio State Buckeyes a few years ago, and
Oh
Devin
yeah.
Hester returned the opening kickoff for the Super Bowl a few years ago. Both teams ended up losing. There's something about when there's that huge play, that first play of the game, everyone's like, oh, wow, let's go. And then that team all of a sudden ends up kind of flat the rest of the game.
Yeah, maybe there's something to that. Yeah, that's interesting. But yeah, I mean, that's what happened. And credit to the kid, he came back and was resilient, and his defense was just all over. What do you make of the story coming out that the defenders knew the signals and knew what plays were coming from Detroit side?
So on one end, it's like, okay, that would explain a lot, right? Because it just seemed like they knew where the ball was going. Yeah. But on the other end, it's just, I have a hard time believing that this is something a professional football team would not have accounted for.
You would think so. You would think so, right? You would think that would be the case.
It'd be pretty arrogant. And I mean, I don't, it's like, if that's what they were doing, then we would have seen this problem last year, right? It's not like, Jim Bob Cooter just got there. But yeah, it was just a very, very ugly game. We got to give credit to the Jets because, it's one of those things where everyone thought the Jets were kind of, like a gutter type of team here, but you give him Darnold, you add some key pieces like, Isaiah Crowell, you look kind of good. That defense is, this isn't a team. They're not the Bills. I don't think they're the Bills. They have a lot of fight in them, I think. But at the same time, man, if you're a Lions fan, sheesh.
Now you're going out to San Francisco week 2. You start 0-2. You basically have an 8% chance of making the playoffs. It's been shown and proven. So elimination game in week 2, it can't be how
especially in the NFC and that's
well, that's not good.
Let's talk about these Lions receivers here. Because Kenny Golladay, he was like the one bright spot for me. I saw him making catches that Marvin Jones would usually make.
Yeah, career high in snaps, receiving yards, and targets. Hit all 3 of those. And we kind of thought this would be the case. We said that they were going to play 3 receivers a ton. We talked about it in our preseason usage article. And then, without Eric Ebron, that was close to 90 targets that opened up. They didn't really bring in a pass-catching tight end. So it's really going to be these 3 guys where the targets go. A little bit concerning maybe for Marvin Jones because Golladay looked like the number 1.
Yeah, no, he absolutely played like the number 1 in Marvin Jones. A funny fantasy story, Ryan. I'm sorry if you're listening here, but I had a ridiculous fantasy comeback that would not have been possible if Marvin Jones didn't drop 2 touchdown passes. Marvin Jones is a playmaker, and he's gonna come down with those. So I wouldn't be worried if I had Marvin Jones at all, but. So this game, get this, I told you, Brian, I was down about 18 points going into the Monday night games, and I had Rams defense and Brandon Cooks, and he had Marvin Jones. Marvin Jones kind of laid a goose egg. Brandon Cooks. Yeah, I still didn't feel too good about it because, I knew I needed something at that point, like 23 points between 2 guys. And
oh shit, they had the late pick 6, didn't they?
The late pick 6 sealed it. I was sitting, I was like laying in bed. I was just like watching football. I kind of already felt like I lost. Right. I was still peeking at the score, refreshing it. But here it is, 2 minutes, 30 seconds. Like I'm down 5 points. And all I could think of for a few seconds was like, damn, if only they gave Julio Jones that fucking catch he had. And then next thing you know, Peters is doing the Marshawn Lynch in the end zone. So that's the best of fantasy football, man. That's the worst and the best. So
yeah.
Totally. But as far as the Lions go, I'm not worried about Marvin Jones. Stafford, they'll be better. They're not going to be that bad. I don't think the Lions are going to be like a 3 because if they're going to be this bad, they're going to go 3-13, and I don't see that happening.
I don't think so either. But the one good thing, if their defense truly is this bad, I mean, it's going to be a ton of targets for all 3 of those receivers.
Mm-hmm. And Golden Tate had a touchdown and was very involved. So the Rams kind of continued where they left off. And nothing surprising there. Brandon Cooks is the new piece and the new toy for McVay. Did you like how McVay used him? Do you feel like he could be either A, more successful than he was in New England, or B, like obviously more successful than Sammy Watkins was in a similar role?
Yeah, so it's kind of he was in a different role than what Sammy Watkins was last year, and a different role than what he was in New England last year also. So they ran him on all kinds of different routes. They took a lot of deep shots with Robert Woods, which I thought would be the Sammy Watkins / Brandon Cooks role, but they kind of said they were going to use him differently than they were Watkins. Watkins was basically a decoy for most of the plays. He was the last option on many plays, but that wasn't the case with Cooks. And they didn't have to put the foot on the gas most of the game. With Oakland's offense is not keeping track. So I think all three of those guys, those two, Cooper Kupp, can all have fantasy value. And I think if you drafted Cooks, you're definitely encouraged by the types of routes he was running and how they used them.
Yeah, I am. And to the point of both Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods, these guys are going to be very viable fantasy options week in, week out. Sometimes it really is going to come down to picking the right guy. But as we saw last Monday night, there's enough balls out there to feed them all. Yep. And Gurley, right, the consensus #1 pick, second half. He showed what he's all about. That's if you got him with the third pick somehow, overall you're feeling really good.
Oh yeah, just the creative mind of McVay. And you said you were watching the game, so I'm sure you saw late in that second half when they literally ran back-to-back play action screens right in the fourth quarter. Up by a couple of scores. Just incredible play calling.
I loved it. They were up 10 in the fourth quarter, and they were calling it like they were trying to win the game. They know that if you score that extra touchdown, it's a 3-possession game. They weren't just going to run the ball and punt the ball and then give the Raiders a chance. So unlike
the Bears,
which we like, and unlike the Bears will continue. I don't think the Bears will do that going forward. But so let's recap some injuries here, and see if there are anything kind of worthwhile for those that have waivers processing. Doug Baldwin looks like he'll be dealing with a knee injury that could put him out a few weeks. Brandon Marshall kind of stepping in. Do you like him at all going forward?
Yeah, he looked better than I thought he would. I'm not sure how deep your league is, but Tyler Lockett, he's going to play a lot more in the slot now. Mm-hmm. He did on Sunday after Doug Baldwin left. So I think both of those guys, if they're available, obviously Lockett's probably more highly owned than Marshall is. But yeah, I think Marshall's with a flyer. A few bucks on your free agent bidding. They're going to have to pass. This defense is not good anymore, so I like it.
Sweet. Yeah, no, I just picked him up, so I feel good about it. Greg Olsen, he is currently, what was the extent of his injury?
Just out indefinitely, week to week. You look at Pro Football Doc on Twitter. He used to work for the Chargers. Really, really strong injury insight on Twitter. Mm-hmm. He thinks he could be
foot or something.
Yeah, it could be gone for the season. He thinks maybe second half of the year. He's not getting surgeries. He's going to try to rehab it, which may not be a good thing. So, right. If you need a flyer in your tight end premium league or super deep league, maybe his backup Ian Thomas, who we played a bunch in preseason, looked pretty good. But I think if I had Greg Olsen, or if I had Delaney Walker, who also went down for the year, I would look at his backup, Jonnu Smith, second-year guy who's crazy athletic profile and has always performed when getting the target. So I think Jonnu Smith, if you had either Olsen or Walker, is probably the guy you want to look at.
Yeah, no, I agree there. So moving on to week 2, and we cover week 2, everything you need to know with our plug, which will be out on Friday. Be sure to give that a read. Check out the Occupy model, which is now up to date. That's where we'll give you all the good info for what you need to know next week. But at the same time, we'll run through some games here. I'll pull up the schedule. Let's do kind of like a rapid fire. And if there are any notes or anything that you kind of want to mention, have at it. Sound good, Brian?
Let's do it rapid fire. I like it.
All right, sweet. Panthers at Falcons. Falcons 6.5-point favorites. 10 days to kind of prepare here. Gut feeling?
McCaffrey's going to have a monster game. Deion Jones out for the year, star linebacker. Keanu New out for the year. The Falcons give up pretty much the most receptions to running backs since Dan Quinn has took over. And now the reason they do that, they have these athletic linebackers that let them catch the ball in front and they make plays. Now that linebacker and that safety is not there, McCaffrey's gonna have a big game.
There you go. Colts at the Redskins. More of the same from the Skins backfield this week?
I think so. Yeah, the Colts defense struggled a bit. The funny thing is, the Skins had 0 yards on deep passes and just 2 yards on medium passes, which is 10 to 20 yards. All their passes came in the short passing game, so I'd expect more of that.
Texans at Titans, the banged up Titans, but it looks like Mariota should go. It's a division showdown, but who sticks out?
I think Deshaun probably bounces back, but as we said earlier, DeAndre Hopkins should just have a huge game.
Mm-hmm. Bucks hosting the Eagles. Any more Fitzmagic, or does it kind of come crashing hard this weekend?
No, dude. I don't know if you've seen the meme on Twitter where it's like the Ryan Fitzpatrick cycle.
The cycle, yeah.
So if you haven't seen it, go check it out. But yeah, I expect big game, 10 days to prepare for the Eagles. Bucks are missing a ton of starters, especially on defense. I think this could be a blowout type game.
Mm-hmm. Chiefs at Steelers. Something we're talking about here is the spread.
Yeah, so let me pull it up here. And if you look at over the last couple of years and you look at teams who have played 2 road games to start the season, which is the case for the Chiefs here. They went to LA last week. Now they're traveling across the country, or not across the country, but in theory across the country. After
halfway across,
to Pittsburgh. Those teams are 14 and 22 against the spread in week 2. Kind of makes sense, right? Traveling a ton. 85% of the bets are on Kansas City. Pittsburgh tied week 1 in Cleveland. The Chiefs just blew out the Chargers and looked like the best team, the best offense in the league, right?
Look at the Eagles back when they beat the Redskins that year with Mike Vick and Deshaun Jackson.
Yeah, no, but for real. And so you have these 2 complete opposite recency biases hitting together. 85% of the bets, the highest. It's the most bet game so far this week, and that spread hasn't moved off -4. It'll be in the betting plug this week, but Pittsburgh -4 is one of the strongest bets you can make.
Dolphins at the Jets. We'll get to see if Sam Darnold can continue where he left off, and both teams are undefeated.
Yeah, 1-0. One of these 2 teams is going to be 2-0. The Xavier Howard, the cornerback for the Miami Dolphins, has been unbelievable in training camp and has really taken that next step. So curious to see if he shadows Robbie Anderson or not. Jermaine Kearse should be back. If that's the case, we saw Enunwa had 9 targets on limited snaps last week. He should continue to be a great PPR play.
Quick question. Any concern about Kenyon Drake's usage and just how involved Frank Gore was? I think he saw about 30% of the snaps. And he got a lot more carries. Frank Gore was getting a lot of touches per snap.
Yeah, and 9 carries, I think. And Gore looked good. That's the problem, right? If he looked mediocre, we could say, all right, Drake's going to eventually take over. But they've made it clear, right, that they want to kind of split work. It's going to be tough for Drake to really be a running back 1 if that split continues.
But he should be solid RB2 in my eyes.
Oh, yeah.
Chargers at the Bills. This is one of those things where the Bills, we feel like, are the worst team in the league. The Chargers are always doing this Chargers shit where we're very high on them, and then they just find ways to lose, and then they come back in games and they still lose. And they got to win, right? Forget the West Coast going east thing here.
Nah, bro, I can't forget that. This is like the most prime Chargers letdown spot of all time, right? I mean, I still think they win. 7 points is still a lot, though, for this situation. I mean, I'm sure the Bills will still probably get blown out.
Yeah, Chargers defense start him. Melvin Gordon start him. Vikings at Packers. Kirk Cousins gets his first kind of division showdown against A-Rod.
Yeah, this will be an interesting game. Rodgers didn't practice today, Wednesday. No one seems concerned on the Viking side. They're like, hey, he's going to play. He walks on water. He's going to play. So expect him to be out there. The one thing that I read about was, I think 22 of his 23 passes in the second half were from shotgun. Aaron Rodgers, when his leg was, or his knee was injured, and he's had a much higher success rate, yards per attempt out of shotgun than he has under center throughout his career. So, you may be worried about his injury, but this could be huge for his fantasy numbers.
So Mike McCarthy could accidentally stumble upon.
It's exactly what's going to happen. Yeah.
Browns at the Saints. The Saints. What New Orleans team are we going to see?
Dude, I don't know. The defense can't play that badly, right? But I think the one thing, Josh Gordon did have the touchdown last week, and even the Browns can't
The accidental start.
It's just the most Brown shit I've ever heard. Like, he's not going to start, and then they start him on accident because of the
Oh,
package.
I didn't. It was our fault. Whoops.
Yeah, like, and then he was supposed to play 20 snaps. He played like 69. So, I mean, Gordon's in line for a big workload. If things go as planned, their defense is bad. Gordon, Landry, start all the receivers. Tyrod Taylor.
Yeah, it's still early in our process as far as kind of, going through the model, looking at who we're going to be playing, but kind of early favorite for a game that could be interesting to stack players from both teams. Drew Brees, I think, is in, unless the Saints just blow him out, I think Drew Brees is in for another monster game at home. Lions at the Niners. Stafford can't be that bad again.
It can't be. I mean, he got busted up too, though. Knee and shoulder. He got internal bleeding. Like, he got fucked up there towards the end of the game. So, we'll see. Traveling across the country on a short week, never a good thing. I would imagine a pretty big Niners win.
Cardinals at the Rams. The Rams, in my opinion, look like the best team in the league. Is this a butt kicking situation? Will DJ have a bounce back game?
Yeah, I think DJ bounces back. The thing here, the Rams, it's kind of talked about how awesome their corners are with Peters and Talib, and Jared Cook had a basically career game as all the targets were funneled towards the tight end. That could be the same case here with Ricky Seals-Jones. He's probably a good play in DFS. And then what do you think? Do you think the Cardinals, we mentioned the Redskins having 0 deep yards, only 2 medium passing yards. You think that was a case of how the Cardinals defense was playing them, or do you think that was just the Redskins offense and the way the game turned out?
Well, I think a function of both. I think it plays to the Redskins' offense strength. First and foremost, the Cardinals' defense, they're pretty good last year. Going into this week, I'd be surprised if the Rams, I'd bet the over on the Rams. I don't know what it is right now, so it's kind of foolish to say, but I think they'll put 28, 30 points on the scoreboard. So no, I'm not really worried about Arizona's defense.
All right, yeah, I mean, I'm not worried about it either, and I think that this is a completely different offense than what the Redskins were running, and I don't think the Cardinals are that talented to where they're not allowing any deep yards on a consistent basis.
Yeah, Pats at Jags, the Gronk versus Jalen Ramsey game.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what they do here because Gronk has historically not performed when a cornerback has covered him compared to a safety or linebacker. So. I don't know. Leonard Fournette's going to be a big impact on this game if he plays or not, and how DJ Yeldon is used. I don't know. I'm not really sure what to think here. What do you think about a repeat of the AFC Championship game? Do you think Jacksonville competes?
I think they do. I really do. I still think this New England offense without Edelman, it just kind of changes things for them. It changes how teams game plan. I think the Jaguars' life. And look, it's not like Edelman was there last year, but they also last year had Cooks until he got hurt in that game. It's going to be close, man. I think it's going to be one of those good 4-quarter battles. Maybe not a place where I'm looking for much fantasy action, but a great football game.
Yeah, the only thing I would keep an eye on is Rex Burkhead, who, like we said earlier, was out with a concussion today. Unsurprisingly, already hurt in week 2. But if he is out,
big boost.
James White could catch 10, 12 passes if that happens. So just definitely keep an eye on that. That's a major injury.
Absolutely. And once again, keep in mind we're doing this podcast before we really dive into the following week's research. And it's a good point to make right there. Rex Burkhead right now, we don't know what his status is going to be. And that really moves the needle for James White if he's out. Raiders at the Broncos. Can the Broncos start 2-0?
Yeah, they are since 1970 or since the merger. They've only lost, 49-8 during the first 2 weeks at home. I imagine it has something to do with the altitude. Yeah, I mean, that number is just crazy, especially for betting purposes. I think Oakland coming here a short week, going into the altitude. Oakland's not known for their altitude acclimation. They did the same thing in Mexico City last year where they got ran out of the country by New England, who got there early and trained in Denver. Oakland doesn't care. They'll show up the day before. I imagine it's a tough game for them. I think Royce Freeman, who looked good last week despite splitting time with Lindsey, should have a big game. Emmanuel Sanders is going to continue to have a big game. My question to you is Phillip Lindsay. What are we doing with him in season-long leagues? Do you think he's worth a pickup?
Yeah, he's definitely worth a pickup in season long leagues. But at the same time, it would not surprise me if that was literally his like season high as far
Oh
as
yeah.
like carries go. But hey, this is a good matchup, right, against the Raiders and probably a favorable game script. But it's still for me, like, I saw today, I think he went for about like $30 out of 100 in our free agent auction.
Oh wow.
Yeah, that's I'm not doing that. Like maybe I throw five on him,
Right.
but it's to the point where like if you really need someone like that, you probably had a really bad draft at running back.
Yeah, if you went like zero running back and hoped that a couple running backs would pan out to
It's
injuries or
probably not
both,
it.
yeah, that's the only way I would bid a decent amount on him because
Yeah.
I do think the Broncos are going to start. They're not as good as their week 1 and week 2 games are going to indicate. So
Mhm.
he should get some more run down the line. But I think $30 out of 100 is way too much.
And that's the thing is, kind of comes down to projecting what's going to happen going forward versus what does. And right now, we don't have the data. We don't have the sample size. If we see the same thing this week, and Lindsey gets 16 carries, it's going to be a different tone we might be singing. Giants at Cowboys. Someone's got to win.
Man, Odell Beckham's going to have a huge, huge game. He could have roasted this Jacksonville defense that we look at as the best passing defense in the league. He had 61% of the team's air yards in week 1.
Mhm.
Eli missed him on a wide open deep touchdown. He could have had 2 touchdowns. Still would end up with 100 receiving yards. So Odell's going to have a huge year in this offense.
And something we had talked about, kind of the lack of tight end production week 1, not outside of Gronk, not many guys really took off. And Evan Ingram was one of those guys who, if you look at the stat sheet, wasn't really anything going on. But if you watch the game closer, he did have 2 pretty big plays that got called back. Is he in line for some big potential here?
I think so. Yeah, he should be the number 2 in this offense. And like you said, after Gronk, you got Kelsey now with Olsen and Delaney out, or Delaney Walker, like the number 3, 4, 5 tight end spots are up for grab in fantasy. So Ingram should certainly be one of those guys.
And Monday night, Seahawks at the Bears. It's B Marsh revenge game. Bet you didn't think of that.
No, I didn't. I definitely didn't think of that. So, for me, it's Bears must win for my future. So that's all I'm thinking about. But Seahawks defense is struggling. This could be a more of a shootout than we think. Although that Bears defense looked pretty good, and you have the combination of Seattle's offensive line coming in there. It could get ugly early for Seattle. I don't know. I'm admittedly kind of biased in this game, so I want your impartial thoughts.
I hear you. I mean, it looks like a nightmare waiting to happen. If I had the Bears defense, that's something I'd be pretty excited about. What do you think of? Let me ask you this, because right now I haven't looked too much into this game. It's kind of right, like it's hard for me to project what's going to happen. But as far as Earl Thomas is playing, right? We have Allen Robinson on the outside. We know about the Chicago running backs, but Trey Burton, right? He didn't deliver week 1. Do you think he's in a better spot against a team like the Seahawks, or is someone like Earl Thomas make it a tougher matchup?
No, I think he's still in a good spot. As long as he plays as much slot as we think he's going to play. I mean, we saw what Emmanuel Sanders did out of the slot last week to Seattle. I mean, just completely shredded them. I think Burton should have a pretty big game, should bounce back. He had a good amount of targets. It's kind of an unlucky game for him in week 1. So, I'm going to continue riding this Bears offense, and hopefully they play 2 full halves.
I like it. All right. Well, hey, guys, thanks for joining us. And be sure to check out the Thursday plug for the Bengals and Ravens game, and come back on Friday to check out the daily plug for Sunday. And the model is up and updated. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to give us a shout at Occupy Fantasy. Brian, any closing thoughts?
No, just subscribe, listen to our podcast. As soon as you subscribe, you'll get our latest episodes sent right to your phone. Leave us a review. If you leave us a review, we might give you a little gift. So leave a review, helps us out, helps you out. So we appreciate you listening. And like I said, we got content coming all week, every week for the next 16, 17, 18 weeks. So
sweet deal. And before we wrap up, don't let Peyton Barber's statistics fool you. He was 3rd in the league in yards after contact. Ain't that right?
That's correct. I'm surprised when you said you take Gurley first, Kamara second. I thought you were gonna say Barber third, and then I would have shut down the podcast. But
Uh,
dude, Ronald Jones wasn't active though, so I mean, this is Barber's role for now.
I like it. I'm all here for it, and not this week. Not this week. I don't like the matchup. He'll be on my bench, but by season's end, he'll be 1,000-yard back, and he might find that end zone 8 times.
I pray you're right for your sake.
My man. All right, guys. We'll catch you next week. Give us a holler at Occupy Fantasy. Talk to you soon.
Take care.